We are talking about the hidden power of neurofeedback for dysregulation. People like you've spent months in therapy, but when you are struggling, your kid's still melting down, maybe they're avoiding school or homework or they can't calm their body. It's not that the therapy isn't helping, it's that their brain can't use it yet. This is my life's work, my mission in talking about regulation first, not just regulation first parenting, but regulating first in so many ways, whether it's at home, it's at school, it's at work. We have to do that. We're going to really talk about why therapy often doesn't work. And we're talking all kinds of therapy, but mostly talk therapy, because I am a believer in therapy, but so many people try it, doesn't work. But also, what about medical therapies? What about occupational and physical therapy? Why aren't these things working? And I want to share some of the insight of the thousands of kids that I've worked with and adults. I do still work with adults. How neurofeedback, how actually even PMF retrains the brain, right? Neurofeedback is, we're going to talk about what it is, how it works, when you need it. What are those red flags that really help you to better understand this is the time? Neurofeedback retrains the brain so that you can regulate focus and really thrive. I was so fortunate that this week I got to spend time with one of the moms that I had started helping about 15 years ago, and got to hear how her kids at 29 and 31, what are they doing, how successful they are, and actually really find out about just some of the conversations that I had in actual therapy with one of the kids, just how it changed his life and how actually our talk about the nervous system and brain actually influence not just his own life, but he's helping others with that as well. It's so funny because if you think about when people say something to you, or even an act of kindness where it sticks with you, I have found time and time again, when I teach kids about the brain, it takes away that shame. It helps them to understand. It makes a difference. So I always like to share some of these stories, but I recently worked with somebody named Ethan. 2 years, they were doing talk therapy, and he could go into the office and he could talk about his feelings, but it never translated outside that office. He couldn't apply those skills. He couldn't use coping skills at home. He couldn't do anything with it. And he'd go from being calm to a hot mess in seconds. And then he would feel awful and tearful. And his therapist just said more impulse control and follow through. His parents were like, we've been coming here every week for 2 years. Like, we believe in therapy. They had used it for their other kid, and they just couldn't figure out what was happening. So we did a brain map. Make sure you go back and listen to the previous episode. If you're listening on any other platform other than our Natural Solutions Facebook group, you can go to drroseann.com/group. That's the only way to get access to these for 3 days. And make sure if you're not on getting our newsletter, you're going to drroseann.com/newsletter. That will automatically give you information, because we only have these up for 3 days. So why? As I always am going to tell you, my mother Philomena says, move your coolie. If you let it sit there, you're not going to watch it. So you got 3 days, people. What happened in Ethan's brain map is we saw that his nervous system was in fight, flight, or freeze. And nothing was going to stick, because once that nervous system is activated, it's in survival mode. That frontal lobe isn't working. And we're going to talk about that. And once we did neurofeedback and we started to calm his nervous system, in particular, his brain's communication centers were really super active. And again, we could see this right on a brain map, right? We didn't have to guess, even though his behaviors were showing that. We're going to talk about red flags. But once we started to regulate, good news. It wasn't like he wasn't listening to those strategies. He just couldn't do them, because in the real world, you get activated. But he was able to pause. He was able to think. That impulsiveness really calmed down. And he really was able to be present in his life, do well. And he did continue therapy because he really needed problem-solving skills in the real world. He knew what the strategies were. He just needed coaching on how to actually implement them. He's done really, really well. So Why does traditional therapy fail? And again, I'm not trash talking therapy. We have to do things in the right order. We don't regulate the nervous system, wasting time. I'm going to say that every time we talk in this series, because as I'm moving towards retirement of clinical practice, not some of the other things I'm doing, I really want you to hear this, because if we don't regulate first, you are wasting time, money, hope. I want you to have hope. You got to do things. So, talk therapy assumes the prefrontal cortex, this is what makes us human, is online. This is our thinking brain. So, we sit there, it says we have conscious awareness. We can access that part of our brain that requires us to really think. But as soon as you are dysregulated, boop, goes offline. And this is biology. This is here to protect us so that we can take action without thinking. This dates back to the prehistoric caveman times. Now, it doesn't matter what the stressor is, real or imagined. Once you're in a chronic stress state, your amygdala, I also call it amygdala, that's your emotional brain. It's going to hijack. And that's why kids know what they know, but can't show it, because they literally lose access to the neural pathways under stress. That's why they can explain deep breathing. That's why they can sometimes even really do these things in a session, but it's just not translating. And what happens is, therapists, this is new information to them. What I'm doing is trailblazing, groundbreaking work. Regulation first is created by me. What's happening is they're just not understanding this, and they think, I just keep pushing the therapy. Therapy is good. We know clinically it's great. You need to be regulated. And I'm not saying perfect regulation, but regulated enough. And it has to be out of panic. And I think parents miss this because they think, well, how bad is my kid's life? It doesn't matter what you think. It's what the nervous system is thinking. And once we have that, you can't talk a brain out of panic anymore that you can stop a smoke alarm when it's blaring. You have to stop the fire. So what are we doing? What is neurofeedback? How does it work? How can it be helpful? It's a non-invasive training that teaches the brain to self-regulate, and through what we call feedback loops. It's real-time feedback for the brain to regulate itself. Now, EEG neurofeedback is what I do. I do it for a reason. It is not all neurofeedback is the same. I'm not trash talking any kind of neurofeedback, but this is what I do because the brains I work with are complex. It gives me the most control, the most efficacy, and I can directly train exactly where I am. There's all kind of devices out there. Once you start using devices, you start losing that potency, that ability to control specific areas. They're good for general stress. And it literally happens within 2 seconds of training. The brain says, it doesn't matter what state the brain is, the brain says, oh, I want this visual. In our case, we use movies or shows, and the brain says, oh, I want this movie to play. And I figured out if I make my frontal lobes be less unfocused, this movie will play, and it will maintain that level of focus in order to get the reinforcement. So over time, you do 2 to 3 sessions a week for 30 minutes each, 30 minutes or less. More does not mean better. The brain strengthens its ability to return to calm state on its own. So you go from, I'm going to talk about all the time because I'm obsessed with micro workouts, 2 to 15 minute, really even 2 to 7 minute workouts. And you teach the body over time to strengthen itself. You don't do one workout for an hour and you're buff. It's not the way it works. It would be great. It's the same exact way in the brain. Like it needs a gentle repetition to create stronger regulation pathways. And that's what neurofeedback does. There's nothing coming through the wires in this form of neurofeedback. I'm not a fan of lens, which does put things in there. Only the reason why I'm not a fan is there's no good research studies to show there's any long-term efficacy in the same way that EEG and S-Loretta has. S-Loretta is cap training. I'm not a fan of it for kids. Absolutely not for any of my chronic layered cases, but it's good for adults. You have to put a QEEG brain map cap on with the goop every time. That is not going to happen for the kids I work with. They're going to go, get me out of here. What's the science behind here? It's really about brain frequencies, brainwave frequencies. We're changing the frequencies in the brain. So we have different frequencies. They have names like delta, theta, beta. There's even super, super high gamma, which meditators have, which is always cool when I see that. But we know that high beta equals stress, anxiety, OCD, reactivity. It's on. High beta is exactly what you think. It's too much. We have low beta or low alpha. We see difficulties with regulating calm, focus, learning and processing problems, memory problems, and too much theta. You're a daydreamer, you're distractible, classic kind of ADD patterns. But I also see a lot of theta. Kids have a lot of theta. I would never touch it in a kid. Creatives have a lot of theta. But when the imbalance is there, we see difficulties regulating in life. And what's great about when we talk about dysregulation, it doesn't matter what your clinical label is. We are just addressing those symptoms, those behaviors, those issues, whatever word you want to use, that is blocking you from happiness, from being successful, really feeling good about yourself, feeling good in your own body. Because that's the worry that I see in these 3 years is the level of distress. Somebody recently I was just talking to, they moved here from California. I was like, girl, you're now in the nexus. Like people, I said, I can get in a fight at Costco over a parking spot. She was like, oh my God, this is not like California. It's like refreshing to talk to somebody. And I was like, oh, I know. And I will talk about somebody who doesn't want to talk about participate in therapy. And I don't want to do that right now, but I will promise, put a pin in it. Put it in a parking lot. We'll talk about it before I drive out because I think it's a really real concern. Neurofeedback rewards the brain for producing balanced patterns. Doesn't matter if you have ADHD, anxiety, OCD, pandas, trauma. It doesn't matter. It matters to the practitioner, and the success of neurofeedback is 100% determined by the success of the practitioner. 30 to 40% of all my clients are people who've done neurofeedback elsewhere and not had success. Either it did nothing or they had a destabilization. And the reason why I've done over 10,000 brain maps, I know how to interpret them, but I'm also really skilled at protocols. Wherever you go, if it's not with me because I'm time limited, you want to find a certified provider by bcia.org. It makes a difference. They've met minimal qualifications. Don't panic. You're all going to message me and say, my provider's not certified. That's your choice. And no, I don't refer anybody. When the nervous system learns to calm itself, kids don't just behave or act better. They feel different. They communicate differently. They think differently. They regulate. They can learn. Once you're regulated, I mean, I'm going to say this 100 times. We know that long-term research about happiness, what's the thing? Self-regulation. Kids that can regulate are happier. End of story. I know you're worried about SAT scores in college. It doesn't matter. What matters if your kid is happy and confident. When they're happy and confident, there are no limits to their success. If you have an A student kid who's got anxiety, guess what? They're going to have freaking problems. End of story. You're going to hear me get saucier and saucier about this because I am frustrated that people are not prioritizing mental health and we're making it really complex. I'm going to talk all about this in my book that comes out in 2026. I'm going to teach you all about it. And I promise you, every single person can do this in under 10 minutes a day. And you don't need money to do it. You just need to commit to 10 minutes a day. But we're here to talk about neurofeedback. What are the red flags? How can you tell if your child needs neurofeedback? Like, when is it an option? First of all, there really isn't anybody on the planet that couldn't benefit from regulating their brain. Okay. With that being said, there's time, there's money, there's all these factors in it. So here's when you have a red flag when therapy alone is not enough. Progress is stalled, not happening, or inconsistent. Maybe they're good in a session, but those meltdowns at home keep happening. Well, first of all, I would also say to you, if your child is just in therapy, and they're under age 18 or whatever age, if they're still living with you and you're not in therapy with them, get a new freaking therapist. A lot of therapists don't like to do family work because it's hard and they suck at it. So get yourself a new therapist because I have a beef. I've fired many a therapist working here because they refuse to work with the family. Family work is messy. Like, this just no way. Like 80% of the parents who come to me are not in agreement about their kids' issues. That means there's work to be done. But kids need parents that are core values, the core messaging is clear. You don't have to agree on everything, but you need that. If that progress isn't happening, why? Is it because you're not in there being coached? Kids can explain coping tools. They can say it, but they're not implementing it. That's a red flag. You also have sleep problems. You have eating problems like ARFID or restrictive eating, picky eating, even sensory issues that don't seem to be able to be stopped. You have hypervigilance, so that's stuck on thoughts, stuck on behaviors, constant overwhelm where they're emotionally reactive and it's not ending. All kids get emotionally reactive some of the times, but if it's their go-to behavior, and then when emotional resets take more than 30 minutes, if they're hours or days, you got a dysregulated nervous system. When you see this, right, it's not a motivational issue. It's not an attention issue. It's dysregulation. Therapy gives you the map to deal with things. We want therapy. We want coping skills. But neurofeedback gives you the vehicle to drive it. Without that regulation, it's just not going to happen. And here's the deal. Neurofeedback is highly effective. There's 60 years worth of research. It is easy. It's pleasant. We're going to talk about those kids that don't want to do it. I've had one kid refuse. One kid right now who's trying to refuse, but her parents said, hit the road, bologna and cheese. Why do kids refuse therapy? Because they've tried it and it doesn't work. And also, when we go into talk therapy, these therapists are like, feelings. That is the last thing. The way that it works in the brain is body, so it's sensations, then it's thoughts, then it's feelings. If you try to go to a kid and you're talking about, like, I had somebody try to do cognitive behavioral therapy with a 5-year-old because they had good verbal skills. That doesn't work. It doesn't matter. You have to get people to understand what's happening in their body, connect to it, connect to runaway thoughts before you talk about feelings. Feelings is the lighting of the candles. So we're not doing therapy in a way that the body can accept. This is not a matter of me saying, oh, this is the right way. This is what science tells us. So when we have resistant kids, it's because they have shame, they have a history. They also, is the kid the only one going to therapy and your house is a freaking mess? You're all struggling. That happens a lot. Is there generational trauma? Is there generational anxiety? Like, what are we doing to kids? Are we pathologizing only them? We have to find a right provider who can speak to your kid in a language that they feel connected to. Also, what do? I have somebody right now that's paying their kid to do neurofeedback, $10 a session. So how can you negotiate them? Because this is a kid that was resistant because nothing else worked, but this is working. So we have to help them regulate. And maybe you have to do more. Many kids I work with, we can't do talk therapy. We have to only do regulation. Many people start with my PEMF. It's upside down. I had it in my pocket today. It's a device. I'll be talking more about it, that sends low hertz magnetics to the body and changes the cells, pulls you in a parasympathetic state, pulls down inflammation. I have kids that are so resistant to therapy that parents have to go in and put this on them when they're sleeping. We got to do. Maybe you got to put magnesium in there, double dose magnesium. Of course, you're going to use Neurotastic because it has the types of magnesium for the brain. It has L-threonate, gets right in there. So you might have to get creative. You might have to negotiate, but just know what the resistance is the other stuff wasn't working. Maybe it's something at home, and guarantee you there's shame. If you've been doing something and it doesn't work, you're going to feel like lousy about it. How do we integrate? Again, once you're doing neurofeedback, it makes everything exponentially more effective. So it will make your feeding therapy, your speech therapy, your talk therapy. It makes everything work better. And that's what I've seen over these 3 decades. Your kid becomes less reactive. We can't connect and we can't correct or teach with our kids until they're regulated. So they can hear things differently. They can recover quickly. They can reflect. And of course, what we want them to be is good problem solvers. And that's only going to happen when you're regulated. If you're in a panic, you're not your best self. Maybe you're driving and you're lost and you're in a panic and you're not thinking straight. Where if you pull over and say, okay, I'm going to look at my phone. I'm going to breathe through this. I just need to go through this thing. And you just instantly are able to access your brain. We're just not thinking about that with kids. One of the things that happened when the kid Ethan that I was talking about, after he started doing neurofeedback, his therapist wanted to talk to me. And she was like, I can't believe the difference in him. Like I don't have to repeat as much. He's getting it. He's actually sharing successes and struggles without being asked. Just really wanted to tell me what a difference. And she later learned to wanted to do the training herself, which is pretty awesome. But when our therapy stalls, it doesn't mean your kid can't improve. I'm the purveyor of hope. And I want you to not feel like it's hopeless. I want you to think. I want you to go, his brain needs more support. But before the mind can heal, we have to regulate. Before a kid can learn new behaviors, how about adults learning new behaviors? They need to regulate. Neurofeedback resets it. So therapy works best when the brain is calm. End of story. Go to www.drroseann.com/help to take our solution matcher. It's the only way to find out if this is the right solution for you.
Want more insights and solutions? Well, subscribe to our Dysregulation Insider and it will show up in your inbox every week.